here in this country brought about the only true revolution that has ever taken place in man's history. Evolved the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny.
The United States of America, the greatest nation in history, ordained by our founders to be guided by divine providence. But today, we are witnessing the orchestrated disintegration of America. Take a few seconds and take a look around your town, your state. Look at your country and your world and boldly ask, what in the hell is going on?
But freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Welcome to the podcast Project Third Eye Open, where we dare to question with boldness the events that are unfolding around us that others won't. At the end of the day, it is we the people who will decide the destiny of the nation. Now, introducing your host, Tony L.
Greetings all. This is Tony L. and you're experiencing another fabulous interview presentation of Project Third Eye Open. I have with me today to share with you is Beth Green. She's an author, musician, and catalyst for change. She looked to help people understand themselves by confronting the system that has shaped them. Hello, Beth.
Hello, Tony.
Excellent. So, tell the folks about you. How to get to this place in your life. Share with us who is Beth.
Well, being 80 years old, there's a lot of history, right? 80, but not dead.
There you go. That's what keep this in the capsule form. Okay, 80 years could be,
right,
5 hours or so. So yeah,
40 years of just to tell you.
So,
well, I was born with a kind of consciousness about what was going on around me, perception, and it was kind of unusual, for a child to be making commentary on people's consciousness when she was 5 years old. You know what I'm saying? But that's the way I was. And I was baffled, all by human behavior. It's like, how could we be so mean? and I say that, because I haven't rehearsed the answer, but, people have suffered. We have all suffered, and yet we inflict suffering on others. That baffles me. I saw prejudice. I came from a Jewish family, and I was born in 1945 at the end of the Holocaust. And people were coming over from Eastern Europe who had been in displaced persons camps, the few relatives that survived World War II, because most of our family was totally wiped out. And the people here were putting down these people who were coming over. And I couldn't believe it, after everything that we've experienced. And the same thing appalls me about Israel. How could we be this way? So, but it isn't just Jewish people. It's all people. We've all suffered. We've been abused in so many ways, and yet we abuse others. And so to try to understand why we do that is really important, especially now when we see a society with a government that is encouraging us to be cruel, to be mean, to be heartless, and to be selfish. So that in 1 second will tell you a lot about me.
That's interesting, that last take. How do you see the government doing that?
How do you not see the government doing that? How is the government?
In your view, in your opinion?
Well, First of all, I believe that Donald Trump was elected out of racism and misogyny. And I don't care what people say was the reason that he was elected. Oh, it was the economy. It was this. I don't believe it. I think it was because he was a racist and he put it out there. And it was because he was a misogynist that he put down women. And if you look at that last Madison Square Garden rally and Tucker Carlson telling women that we should be spanked for not behaving, that really shows you what kind of energy that Trump was appealing to, our worst instincts, our need to assert our power over other people. And of course, that comes from a feeling of powerlessness. Why do we have to put other people down? Is because we don't value ourselves and we don't feel powerful ourselves. So it horrifies me that he was elected. He horrifies me. The absolute unconscionable behavior towards immigrants is beyond belief. The turning back of all the progress that we've had around civil rights, about women's rights, all of that being turned back. And then, of course, you add to that the element of the wealthy just scarfing up all of the resources and leaving people with nothing. It is tantamount to abuse. And yet people don't want to believe it, or that they've been so flattered by him. Christian nationalism, excuse me, that is not what the founding fathers were asking for. So the way we've treated people from other countries, the disabled, the poor, it's just the opposite of what Jesus' message was, which is how you treat the least of my brethren, you do unto me. It's like, yeah, let's gang up on the least of our brethren, and then we can feel powerful. And it's a very sad situation. I do understand that a lot of men in our society feel disempowered, but they're not being disempowered by trans people and by gay people. They're being disempowered by the wealthy people. And I attribute that to the economic system as being a huge part of what's wrong with this country. And the kind of the value system that goes along with the capitalist economy. And I mean, I saw that when I was 9 years old. And I said, I'm a socialist. Now, I'm not really a socialist in the sense that people think of it, but more in the sense of what Marx was talking about, because Marx was saying socialism or communism is from each according to his or her ability, to each according to their need. That's communism.
So you consider yourself I guess a socialist in the sense of the how Karl Marx defines socialism.
Exactly. And I actually read Marx back in the day. I was
Right.
part of all the movements and all that. And I started at a very young age. They threatened to expel me from elementary school. And my parents were not radical. They just sat there and watched and said, who the heck is this child and where did she come from? But I think that if I'm an empath and I feel people's pain, and I think if you feel the pain, you know that something needs to be done. And what I'd like to share for a moment about how Karl Marx defined communism is the same thing as the potluck. And that is American as apple pie, right? Potluck, you bring what you've got, you take what you need. That's the fundamental way that we should be treating ourselves and one another. Mutual support, helping build each other up, not tearing each other down.
Right. So how you define communism?
From each according to his or her ability, to each according to their need.
And then define socialism.
Well, socialism is from each according to ability, to each according to their work. That was the early definition of socialism.
Okay.
But I mean, when I say communism, I don't even use that word because people are like, oh, communism, you know what I mean? They don't even know what it means. They don't know that a potluck is communist, you know, or people coming together to raise a barn when your barn has come. That's everybody coming together to help one another. That is, and you know, and Marx had a very clear analysis of how capitalism works and why it does what it does and what we have to do about it. But we have been very, very brainwashed in this country.
How do you define capitalism?
Capitalism is a system whereby you hire someone to produce work and you pay them less than the value of that work. So you have a profit, and that profit becomes a bigger profit and a bigger profit, and that you put all your energy and attention into creating wealth for yourself instead of taking care of the people who are doing the labor.
Now, I find it interesting that you are pretty close to the definition, Webster's definition of communism and capitalism, well, communism and socialism. But when I ask you to define capitalism, you don't try to use the definition that's in Webster.
Oh, I don't know what the definition in Webster is, so you got me there. But I know what capitalism is.
If you don't know how to define something, how can you speak on what it is?
But I am defining it by Marx's vision. I mean, it is the reality. This is capital, is the accumulation of unpaid labor. Let me give you an example. Let's take slavery, for example. The slave owners derived their wealth by not paying their laborers what they needed even to survive. See, if you go into the Marxist view, and I didn't expect to talk about Marxism today, but you know, here it is. That's what we're talking about. If you look at what it really was, is that your cotton or whatever it is had a certain value in the market, and you sold it, and you made that money. And then you had the people who did the labor, and they barely survived. And it's early because I actually studied history. That was my field when I went to school. And I studied history because I wanted to understand where all of this came from and what to do about it. And so you can see that whether it's somebody working in a factory or a slave on the plantation, that people are producing something that the owners can sell at a profit. And that profit that gets put into hiring more laborers. There is a very important point about this that has to do with women and unpaid labor. If you have in the day when women were being pushed back into the home, and by the way, this idea that women didn't work outside the home is absurd because working class women always were working in cigar factories. I mean, women worked, children were working, everybody was working, right? Or you were working growing food. Somebody had to take care of the laborers so that they could come to work the next day. We are pawns in the system of creating wealth for other people. And so we needed to survive. In the day, or the earlier days of slavery in the Western civilization, I mean, there's been slavery everywhere, right? When they had the slave trade and it was legal, you could replace a slave for less than it would cost to keep them alive.
Well, again,
and if you
this is very interesting because you talk about slavery initially in the context of American slaves, but then you also admit that slavery has been going on since the dawn of time.
Yeah, but there are
But-
different kinds of slavery.
Different types of slavery, but you don't talk about the slavery from back in Egyptian time, where conquerors took the people from the fallen countries and used their labor.
But it's exactly the same thing. They were using their
It's
labor.
It's different. I mean, it's different in the sense that when people want to, I guess, distort the whole position of slavery, and they want to bring in American slaves, it was applied differently because when Europeans first came over here, majority of them were put into called indentured servitude. So they had to work off their labor.
Exactly.
And they had an agreement. They chose to enter that agreement. And most people brought over here were in that position as far as being indentured servants. They agreed to come over here because this is the new land, this is whatever, and they agreed to work for whoever for whatever period of time. And then in most cases, the agreement was once they finished their time that they got, say, 10 acres of land. So it was
As we know. Yeah, but Tony, it doesn't matter. I mean, what I understand what you're saying. First of all, I'm not just talking about American slaves. I'm talking about the New World. You had Caribbean slavery. You had Brazilian slavery. All of these people were brought over without their consent.
No, first of all, when you go back to slaves, you first got to understand where does the word come from. It comes from Slavic. So in those cases, when the Slavs were defeated, they were put into bondage and they had to work. So they weren't brought over anywhere. They were concubines of a conflict. So
but that's why I'm talking about the slavery that built the wealth of the United States, built the wealth of capitalism. I'm not talking about slaves that built the wealth of feudalism I'm talking about capitalism. What built the wealth of capitalism.
But you can't separate the two. A slave is a slave. If you want to say slave and they were supposed to be used against their will, then you have to back that up. There was no contention when America first started bringing people over here to work. They were brought over as indentured servants, and then that turned into slavery. But still, at the same time, we had to understand how you define words. You can't, to me, it seems disingenuous to use the Webster's dictionary in regards to communism and socialism, and then don't try to apply equalization and use Webster's dictionary when you talk about capitalism, because it is a purpose. Capitalism is a sense of me taking my skills and my labor and earning money from that. Exactly. Not taking anyone, but earning money, capital from my services. Anybody could do that.
I agree with that. I'm not talking. I agree with that. That's what I'm saying. I'm not using Webster's definition. I'm looking at what the reality was. And absolutely, capitalism is based on not paying people the value of their labor. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Let's say you have, it has to be.
Why does it have to be?
Well, because
here's a point. If capitalism has to be something that's not based on the definition, why can't, using Devil's argument, why can't socialism be something else that is not defined? It can't be anything we want it to be.
Why is Webster the be all and end all of what reality is?
Well,
why are you giving me Webster? I'm talking about an economic system.
I'm just saying, if you're using definitions,
I do use the definition of Webster. I use the
No,
definition of Marx.
No. I'm just saying Webster because that's what people generally refer to a dictionary as Webster's. It could
Yeah,
be
but I don't.
right,
I don't.
but you did when you told everybody what was communism, what
I
was
did not use Webster's
okay.
definition. I
I said
used Marx's definition
okay,
of communism, and I used Marx's definition, and I'm using Marx's definition of capitalism. I'm being completely consistent. Now, when the Spanish and the Portuguese and everybody came over and started colonizing, they tried to use the indigenous labor, but they died. They
okay,
died.
okay,
Okay, it didn't work.
okay,
So they brought over people that they could exploit. And what exploit means, in my definition, is don't pay people the value of what they do. And I'll be very, very specific about this. If you have a worker and that worker creates shoes, let's say, and you sell those shoes for $10 a piece, and you pay the worker $10 a piece for each shoe, is there a profit?
okay, yeah.
There isn't, right? You
Wait,
have to charge.
say that again.
If you have a worker and he makes a shoe and you can sell that shoe for $10 and you pay the worker $10, there
Okay,
is no profit.
right, okay,
Right? So you have to pay the worker $8 or $6 for you to have a profit.
okay. Now, correct question: does the worker choose to work for the employer?
The worker is looking to survive. The
Does
worker
the
doesn't
worker
have the capital.
does he choose to work? Like when someone goes to McDonald's, they're gonna ask, "How much am I being paid?" They know when they say, "Okay, I agree with those terms."
Yeah, but
Is
then what choice do they have?
they didn't have to go into McDonald's to try to get a job there. That's the choice.
No, where you cannot work for a company and get paid the value of what you produce, or the company will not hire you.
That's not my question. My question was, does the person say with you, if you go to work for an employer or your husband go to work for an employer, he goes in and says, how much are you going to charge me for my labor? Or how much are you going to pay me for my labor? When the employer says, I'm going to pay you this for your labor, anyone, Beth or whoever, had the choice to say, yes, I agree to those terms.
Really?
Yes.
What is your choice? Are you going to go work for A or B or C? You try to go, if you have collective bargaining, you may be able to find somebody who's going to pay you a little bit more. But you're jumping the, can I go back to trying to put out the whole premise and then see how you feel about what I'm saying?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. If you cannot go to work, you cannot produce profit. If you're sick, if you're disabled, if you're high, you may not be able to work for this guy. You have to have see, let me go back to I wanted to go back to the example of what happened when the slave trade became illegal.
Mm-hmm.
When the slave trade became illegal, which was during a lot of American slavery, the owners knew that they had to keep their workers alive because they couldn't get cheaper labor anywhere. The capitalists are always looking for cheap labor. That's why they use illegal, undocumented workers, right? Always looking for the cheapest possible labor. Okay. So what happened was the American slave system had to keep the slaves alive in order to have labor. Whereas earlier, and you see this in the West Indies very clearly, and you see this before they banished the slave trade, what you see is it was cheaper for them to replace the labor with another slave than it was to keep them alive. And the conditions of slavery in those countries was worse because they didn't care what happened to those people as long as they could replace them. When they couldn't replace them, they had to start doing minimal amount of care to those people to keep them alive. It is the same thing with workers who are not slaves. If you don't have workers who are healthy enough to go to work, who are mentally stable enough to go to work, then they can't work for you and they're not producing anything. And then you add to it what Henry Ford was talking about. If they can't buy your cars, what's the point? So people have to have a certain standard of living in order to buy the products. But that doesn't mean that they are not being paid less than the value of their work. Because as I said, it's really clear. If you pay your worker exactly what the value of what they've created, if they've created the shoe, you don't get any profit. And see, if you look at American capitalism now,
I'm confused by that. I'm confused by that. I mean, because you why was someone create a business and then don't want to make a profit?
I didn't say they would. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, this is what it is. Now, I would say that if somebody wants to create a business, they should be compensated for the risks that they're taking, for the intelligence, the creativity. They should get compensated. But you know what's happening today, and I'm sure you know this, Tony, that what the compensation that the wealthy are getting, and then it's become so. It's not even about shoes anymore. It's about stock options and all of that. They want to make money off money, off money, off money. It doesn't even have anything to do with the labor that you create. But that's why they fight the labor union so much. They want to make sure that they have enough profit to make their shareholders. What CEOs, the average CEO is making about $320 more, 320 times more than the worker. In the early days, it wasn't like that. They didn't have that margin. And what's happening is that the capitalists today are getting a larger and larger percentage of the value of the GDP. All you have to do is look at the statistics. What is the value of the GDP, the gross domestic product of what we are creating? And how much of that goes to the top? And how much of that goes to the workers? And you will see that since the 1970s, at least, the amount that goes to the workers is going down relatively, and the amount that's going to the capitalists and the people they're not even doing it. Either the stockholders and all of that is going up and up and up. That's why we have such income inequality. And when you have income inequality, you have power inequality. You said, "Oh, you can choose."
So you mentioned that the reason why we have income inequality is solely because of the owners and capitalists, or I guess,
and the CEOs and all of those are getting a larger and larger percentage.
So do not attribute anything towards taxes, towards the reintroduction of the outcome-based education system that was imposed on the United States after World War II. Because when you hear your grandparents and parents saying that I only need a 6th grade education, and they were able to raise a family on their education. And now you have to have almost a 12-year education. So the difference.
But they're not the ones who are getting all the income inequality isn't coming from people who graduate high school.
Yes, it is.
No.
It's not. You can't just say that one thing causes income inequality. There's context. There's other things. There's a political component. There's
absolutely
IRS. There's an IRS.
This is all about political power.
But
look at the budget. Look at the budget that they're trying to foist on us now. That budget is based on giving greater advantages to the wealthy, and less to the rest of us. And that's just the way it is. I mean, look, you have to get that profit from somewhere, and that profit. I really want to get to this point. If you are a working class woman, let's say, and you have a husband who is going out and getting a job, he has to make enough money to support you and the children. If you do not have a job outside the home, which, as I say, working class women have been working forever in factories and all of those, that's just an illusion about the middle class, the nuclear family is kind of a new concept. Everybody is out there working. You're working on the farm. Everybody is working, but women also do all kinds of work. Now that work, and I'm going to introduce a different idea here. That work has one purpose. That work has the purpose of getting that guy to work. I know this. I grew up in a working class family. I worked in factories.
Wait, okay, you lost me. So the whole point of working is what again?
Okay. The point for us of working is survival. That's it. It's survival. We need some money in order to survive. The purpose of our working for the capitalists is to make money. That's their purpose. Now, it looks like we have the same thing. The same purpose is to make money. But actually, we need the money to have a house. We need the money to have food. We need the money we don't need money for yachts. We need money to survive. Now, the work of women has traditionally been to keep the working class alive. Now, I understand this is a different concept, but so I want you to just take a moment and see what I mean.
Wait, say it again.
The purpose of women's labor is to keep the men alive, the women alive, and raise the children. In other words,
a woman's labor is to keep the man alive?
Yes. I'm talking about in the day. Okay, in the day when women were working inside the home, women's work was iron the shirts, make the food. In fact, in some society, it's growing the food, raising the children. Now, all of that labor was about recreating a working class. If you didn't have children who could go work in the factories, you didn't have any profit. You didn't have any factories. So women, and I know this from experience, Tony, I know what it was like in the day when women were expected to take care of the children, make the man's lunch, clean the house, and then maybe in addition to that, go out and get what we call the second job. Okay. So if women didn't do that, who was going to do that? Now, now there are men who say, okay, they're going to take this role. But
even back then, if men had to do it, they would do that.
But they didn't do as much. They did not do as much. all of the,
It was a different culture back then.
I know that.
Okay.
I understand that. But my point is, this was what women did. They created.
By choice, or what were they forced?
Well, by circumstance. The men didn't want to do it, and somebody had to. And women were trained and brainwashed, and everybody was brainwashed into thinking, brainwashed into thinking that that was women's work.
Were the men brainwashed too?
Oh, yes. Terribly brainwashed. Terribly. They were brainwashed into thinking that they were entitled to come home, drink a beer, and watch television, while the women, who may have gone out and been working a second job, came home and made dinner. I mean, you're not going to deny this.
So again, was a woman entitled to?
Entitled to? What do you mean entitled to what?
I mean, if the man was entitled to, as you say, come home and drink a beer and so-called watch TV,
women were not entitled to.
Were they entitled to anything?
Well, the women were entitled to have the men bring in the money.
So that is win-win.
No, it's not a win-win. And I'll tell you why. No, it's not a win-win. You know why? Because when women were dependent on men for money, the men could beat them, rape them. You know, when I was, a young woman, rape in marriage was legal.
It was legal?
Yes. Rape in marriage was legal. Beating women was legal. And women were supposed to put up with whatever abuse, because they had no choice, because they had no income of their own. By the capitalists hiring the man and having the man, and you're seeing it all over the place now. You see it in dating vans.
Let me ask you a question. So do women get beat up in socialist and communist and authoritarian?
There are no communist countries, and any authoritarian country is not communist.
What is China?
State capitalism. When the government owns, you have to understand that everything that we have been taught about communism is not communism. In fact, I'll go back to Marx just for this moment. Marx said that the first communist country is going to be the United States. He did not believe that you could take a peasant society and turn it into a communist society, because they didn't have the money, the means to do it. He never expected the Soviet Union to become this first, and it wasn't. It's an authoritarian government where the government owned what Marx called the means of production. They owned everything. And it was the government had the social control. I'm talking about.
So China don't own the means of production.
The people don't. The government does, and then they also have changed into a more capitalist model. We know that there's more free market, but no, that's not a communist.
Is there more free market in Russia as well than what it used to be under Stalin?
Yeah, but that's free market doesn't make it a communist country. It doesn't make it free. If people do not, I'm going to give you an example. When you have a cooperative, like in the United States, or you have a country like Germany, you know that they have laws that workers need to have a say, like 50%, I think it is, position on the board of directors. That is a step towards a cooperative society where everybody is engaged, where everybody has something to say about their conditions, that it's not all determined by the people. I worked a lot. I mean, I have been an intuitive counselor since 1980. But prior to that, I worked in factories. I worked in offices. I know all about it. I know what it was like. I know what choices we had. We didn't have choices. You were going to either work for this guy or that guy. Or if you were lucky, you could start your own small business, which wasn't very easy.
Wait, so say that again?
You did not have a lot of choice. You were going to work for Arco. You were going to work for the plastics factory. You know, when I worked in plastic factories.
Wait. Say that slowly again, because it seems like there's a choice in there. Either going to be A or it's going to be B.
No,
so
it isn't a choice. If you are working for Arco, and oh no, you don't work for Arco, you work for John Deere.
That's a choice, right?
No, it is not a choice. It's a necessity. A necessity is not a choice. The slaves went to work every day. You could say that was a choice, but it wasn't. It was a necessity, because if they didn't do it, they would be beat, they would die. If they rebelled, they were killed. Is that a choice?
But even with that, that's a choice. I didn't say they were great choices or equal choices, but it's a choice.
So what? So what is your point? So you have a choice of who your slave master is? You have a choice of being beaten by this husband or that husband? As women, we had no choices. We didn't even have the vote.
That depends on what state you were in.
No, it did not depend on what state you were in. The women's suffrage movement came in the 1920s when women started to get the right to vote.
So are you saying that in particular states, because each state is its own country, basically, you saying no state independently could have voters based on their state politics? Is that what you're saying?
Okay. Are you telling me? So which were the states? Maybe you know something I don't. That's very possible. Which states had women's suffrage before we had national women's suffrage? Which states
first of all,
did women vote?
My question was by voting, not by suffrage. Each state
suffrage voting.
No, no.
Yes, women's suffrage is about the right to vote. Which state had the right to vote?
So do men suffer because they vote?
I don't understand what is it? Do men suffer because they vote?
You just equated voting with suffrage.
No, not suffering. Suffrage. Women's suffrage is the right to vote.
So do men have the right to vote?
Yes.
So they suffrage too.
They had suffrage.
Okay.
That's what suffrage means. I think it's, you're thinking I'm saying suffering.
No. I'm just want to be clear because suffrage is not just a female thing based on your interpretation.
No, it was the same thing. Blacks didn't have the right to vote either. When we started this country, the only people who had the right to vote were wealthy white men.
I can't let this go because individual states have their own, just as now, states have their own say in who votes within their state politics.
You tell me one state where women had the right to vote.
Oklahoma.
When was that?
Before the federal government took over in regards to federal elections.
Okay, fine. So you had Oklahoma.
And well, that's one. My whole point is
I'm going to look this up.
Oklahoma, and particularly when you look at
I don't understand what your point is anyway.
My point is clarity. When people keep saying that women couldn't vote before federal government came into play in the 1940s or 60s.
The 1924. Women got the right to vote.
Federally, not state.
Did women have the right to vote before 1924? I think 1924 or 1920. I don't have a good. Okay. Some women had the right to vote. New Jersey allowed unmarried property owning women had the
But
right
are they
to
not
vote.
women?
Property owning
They're
women.
not women, though.
Some states.
My
I
whole
don't
point
understand what your point is.
It's context. When people say women didn't have the right to vote, women did. First of all, the Constitution was developed for people who own property. Why? Because they had stake in the community.
Oh, listen to you. So,
Yes.
okay, the Constitution, people who were property owners had the right to vote. Did
Yes.
blacks have the right to vote
Some did.
if they were property owners?
Yes.
Okay. Did black women have the right to vote?
Yes.
Okay. Which states black women had the right to vote? But I don't know what you're arguing with. So you're telling me there were some exceptions, but what was the rule? Why
was the rule? My point that when people say that no women had the right to vote until the federal government came into place, I correct it because that's not true.
Okay, but most women did not have the right to vote. And certainly women who were not property owners. And how many women were property owners? You know how many women couldn't even own property?
Women had the right to own property.
Do you know that women couldn't even have their own credit cards? I don't know what you. So you're saying there's in this place they might have had this, and in this place they want they.
But my point is, I try to be clear and honest with people who.
Okay, let's be clear and honest. So I grant you that some women had the right to vote before 1920.
They say that. When people say no women had the right to vote, when people say blacks had the right to vote, that's not true.
Okay, so what? What is the point? The point is, in general,
it's true. It's true.
If you were born in the southern United States and you were black,
which I was.
Well, but back in slave days, could you be dragged back?
In the South?
Yes.
Depends on where you were, because there were black slave owners too.
Oh, I know that.
Okay. So when you say blacks in the South.
What are you trying to prove? That these social movements were useless because we already had all these rights? Well, we didn't already have these rights.
It's rights are defined as natural God-given rights, right to life, liberty,
and the pursuit of happiness.
Not the obtaining of happiness, the pursuit of happiness.
Well, do we? Okay. So first of all, Tony, I find this a ridiculous argument. I feel like we're arguing on the edges of the point. I'm telling you that the capitalist system is based on the company, the owner making a profit, whether it was out of slavery, if it was indentured servants, it was workers, it does not matter. That is the way. And you got into this whole thing about, well, some black people had the right to vote. Some blacks were free.
Right.
I know that. But so what?
But you're not being true when you say all blacks were this and all women was that, because if that's not true.
I didn't say all. Okay, so you're right. So you found one. What does that really change?
It changes the fact that people still were not all. You can't say all when it wasn't all. If you want to be true, say that women who did not own property couldn't vote. Okay, understand that. So
most women, and now, but that's only in certain places where women property owners. In general, is it true, Tony, that women have not had the same amount of pay as men?
They're never going to. They're never going to.
Well, why not?
Because they're not equal.
What do you mean we're not equal?
We're not equal. You're not equal.
Why are we not equal?
Because you cannot do women cannot do everything that men do. Men cannot do everything that women do.
Darling, men can't do everything women can do. How many babies have you had?
That's what. So you just made a point. So we can't be equal then.
It's not equal, doesn't have to do with the same. It means equal in respect and power. If you and I, let's say you and I are married, and let's say I'm disabled, which I am. I can't do anything. I don't cook. I don't shop. I don't do laundry. I can't have children. And I've been sick my entire life. Okay? Wait. My husband can do all those things. He is physically capable. I, on the other hand, have an intuitive gift. I can work with people. I can see into them. I know exactly where they're coming from. I can see into their pasts. I can see into their souls. My husband cannot do that. Wait. We are not the same, but we are equal. But we are equal. He has a right to get his needs met. I have the right to get my needs met. He has the right for respect. I have the right for respect. We don't have to be the same. You are mixing up equal with the same.
No. I'm saying equal is equal. If you have a conversation, I'm equal. But then you say, but he could do this. I can't do this. I could do this, but then that blows up your arguments for being equal.
No, I disagree with you. We are equal. We are not identical. We are not the same. If you look at society, you have no idea how many Picassos are living in slums right now. Do you? And neither do I, because those people's gifts will never see the light of day. Doesn't mean that they don't have them. Everybody has a gift. We just disrespect certain gifts. If a woman is cleaning my house, her work is seen as having no value because she's doing housework by the society. Look at what women housekeepers are paid. Look how they're treated. Women housekeepers have actually had to try to organize. I remember working in a plastics factory, and my roommate worked in a steel mill. I made $1.09 an hour. He made $15 an hour. I still had needs. I still needed a car. I still needed food. I still needed a home.
So why did you go work in a steel mill?
What's that?
Why didn't you choose to go to work at the steel mill?
Because I wasn't physically capable of working in a steel mill. And at that time, women were not hired in steel mills. I got a job in a machine shop. I worked in a man's field. And when I did, I got more money. And it was just beginning to open up to women. Most people wouldn't even hire women. They wouldn't hire women in men's jobs. Personally, unfortunately, being disabled, I couldn't do it. I couldn't work. In fact, I can't even type. But I was shuffled into women's jobs because I was a woman. Women have been fighting to be able to take on the same jobs that men do and are perfectly capable of most of them. And you know what else? There is technology. You know, one of the reasons that I got that job in the machine shop, I'll tell you why. Because I was smart and I knew how to work the technology. And the other guys, they were strong, they were skilled, but they didn't have my capacity to figure out how to make the technology work. Technology has made us equal.
Were those guys equal to you?
Of course they were. Every human being is equal. Every human being deserves a chance for respect. Every human being has needs that need to be met.
So, I mean, as far as every human being deserves respect, that's one issue. Whether you want to go to this notion of equality.
Well, what does equal mean to you?
Equal means that you could do everything I could do, period. 2 + 2 equals 4. Whether you speak in Greek, whether you speak in Arabic, whether you speak in English.
If a woman is a CEO of a corporation and she makes $100,000 a year. And her husband is a better nurturer, and he stays home with those children. Is she above him?
As far as income, yes.
Only but not above him as a human being. You are looking at everything from
I said, when you talk about being human and righteous or whatever, that's two different things. But when you want to say that identical twins are identical, meaning that
I don't say identical.
No, I'm just saying.
The word equal. This is all about definition. This is all that you are.
But every word has a definition for a purpose.
Well, then you have to look at your word. What is equality? What is the movement for civil rights about?
Politics.
Equality.
Politics.
No, it's not about politics. Civil rights is about equality. It means you can sit at the same counter as the white person. That's about equality. You have a right to sit at that counter. Oh, yes.
First of all, the civil rights in 1965 had to do with me being able to sit at the table and not get my head bashed in.
That's right.
But that had nothing to do with equality. That had to do with
it had everything to do with equality.
That had to do with rights. It had to do with rights. It had nothing to do with
call it equal rights, Tony. You're arguing for nothing. You're just you're creating this argument.
Definitions.
Oh, so we call it equal rights. Fine, I'll go along with that. I don't care what you call it.
But
rights. Men and women have equal rights, regardless of the fact that men and women don't have equal rights.
They're not equal.
I said equal. I accept your definition.
Okay, fine.
Call it equal rights.
Right.
I don't know what you're really arguing about. Call it equal rights. Redefine it. That's fine with me.
No, it's not. It's not about redefining. You have equal rights, meaning right, life, liberty, and peace.
Exactly.
Then it depends on if you and I are going after the same job, but the boss knows that women have to take off certain times during the year, certain times that they are more likely to have to go out and have children. That's a money issue. When I'm the employer, I have to look at that. I know the man's going to be there.
But no.
Yes.
Wait, men, just because you can't give birth to a child doesn't mean you're not a father. And in the excuse me, let me finish. In many nations in the world today, men are given time off for having children because it's important for children to have fathers. And it is important for fathers to be able to nurture. That is a part of men that they were not taught. This is all brainwashing. You know what they used to say? You couldn't hire a woman because we menstruate, and when we menstruate, we're irrational. That's what they said to us.
Are you rational when you menstruate?
I don't menstruate, darling. I'm 80 years old. But yes, I was totally rational when I menstruated. Okay. I was never not rational. And a lot of men, what are they doing? Drinking, smoking pot, taking cocaine. How rational are they?
Plenty.
And the women are staying home because they know their children need care, and the men are out womanizing and drinking.
All of them?
Not all of anybody.
Okay.
It's not all of anybody. This is all prejudice. This is all prejudice. I am talking about equal rights. You put it perfectly. I give it to you. I, as a worker, have an equal right to the boss. Now, the boss has a right to fire me, and I have a right to quit. But the boss wants to have all the rights, wants to determine the working conditions, wants to determine how many hours a day I work. I work for the phone company. Do you know it was all women who were doing, the telephone company stuff. Men were climbing the poles. Mm-hmm. Men were making way more money than women, and women were dropping dead. And I'm telling you that this happened. You don't have to believe me, but it did. They were dropping dead because we didn't get sick time, because women were too powerless to be able to organize for our own rights. And women dropped dead because they had to go to work. And of course, because the men felt that they were entitled to stay at the job and didn't have to take care of the children. Who was running home to take care of the children when they were sick? That has nothing to do with biology. That has to do with brainwashing.
Brainwashing on whose side, the women or the men?
Everybody's brainwashed. Women are brainwashed into thinking that men are supposed to take care of them, and men are brainwashed into thinking that they're entitled to be the king of the house. I grew up at a time when men actually thought they should be in charge of everything.
And that was a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing, because men are doing such a great job of running the planet. We know how they're taking care of the climate. We know how men are taking care of the workers. We know how men have taken care of health. We know how many men have stopped wars. We know who is in the Trump cabinet. They're men, aren't they? Most of them
too. Some women too.
There's a couple of women who are trying to look like men.
No, that was in the other administration.
Oh no, Kristi Noem, who shoots her dog, is the
other administration.
Anyway, are you really telling me? I don't know whether you're trying to goad me or you're trying to play devil's advocate, but I don't think you believe a word of what you have said in this entire interview. I don't think you believe that men are superior. I don't think you believe that men should run the world.
No, actually, I never said that. I said there's no such thing as equality.
No, but you just did say it. I said men believe they have been socialized into thinking they're supposed to run everything. And you say, well, aren't they?
Well, I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, no, you're trying to goad me. And I don't know why you're doing this, but I don't want to be goaded anymore. You want to change it to equal rights? Fine. Call it equal rights. It's about equal rights. It's about human beings, about animals. The animal kingdom has no rights in the capitalist world. Everything is a commodity. You throw these chickens together. You put cows in these horrible conditions. We're entitled to run the world. Who said so? Who said so? We have no respect for the planet. We cut down every tree we see. We're destroying the very ecosystem that we live on. And how intelligent is that?
Well, all I know is this is the greatest country on the planet. If you want to go back to China, if you want to go back to Russia, you want to go back to Israel, this country will still reign supreme because we have individuals who get up every day, make choices, whether they want to be the CEO, whether they want to be the laborer, or they want to be the owner.
Tony, you are not that naive. You don't know that there's lead in the water in poor neighborhoods.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Well, yes, you are, because if there's lead in the water, what happens to the brain of the children?
You need to hear me mention. I said people make choices every day in this country.
You have no choice. You're living in areas where there's lead in the water and your child's brain is damaged. You have no choice when Monsanto is dumping pollution into the rivers of West Virginia. And people are like, bleh. You have no choice when the only decent job, paying job you have is to work in a coal mine and you have a choice of getting black lung or going hungry. That's not choice.
That is a choice because you ain't got to be in that jurisdiction. People always move. There's buses and Greyhounds and cars go everywhere in and out of jurisdictions. You don't have to. People don't have to be where they are. They make a choice to stay where they are.
Okay, so where are you going to go? So you say, I want to get away from global warming. I want to get away from pollution. Where are you going to go?
You're moving the goalposts. First, you talk about coal. I said, you have to be a coal miner.
There are people. Okay, so you don't have to be a coal miner, but you have no education. You have no.
Why do you have education?
Because of the economic system, because of the fact that people are going. Did you hear Ron DeSantis telling us that now that we've cleared out the undocumented workers in Florida and we should have the children doing the labor? Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear that.
Oh yes, he was proposing that women work, that children work at night, so they could go to school, so that they could take the jobs of undocumented. What choice does that person who's lived here for 20 years on some kind of a visa, and all of a sudden ICE comes and throws them in a prison somewhere? What choice do they have? What choice does the girl have who's been raped
First
in a
of all,
state where there's no abortion? What choice does she have?
let's look at one thing. If a person here is on a visa, a lawful visa, he's not being deported.
Yes, he is. They're revoking visas. Tony, don't you know that? Don't you?
Again, I said lawful visas. If they're being revoked, they're being revoked. So therefore, they, by definition, they don't have that lawful visa anymore.
They have been revoked by the president, and suddenly they're in prison.
Okay.
Okay, and what is their choice? What choice did they have? They were told that they were sick.
What action? What action?
Okay, I would like to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
And you're not going to like it. I don't think you believe any of this crap. I mean, I'm telling you now, you can disagree with me. I don't care. You can disagree with me. You may be right. I don't think you believe this. I think you've had a series of experiences in your life that are making you say these things, that you are conditioned like everybody's conditioned. People are, Elon Musk was born as a white Afrikaner in South Africa. And what attitude do you think he had? Donald Trump was born in a racist family where money is the only value. What choice did he have if he was going to get the love of his father? Do you think that people's choices are all based on economics? No. A lot of people's choices are based on who they're pleasing, who they're trying to please, where they're getting love from, how they were raised, how they developed. There's a reason for everything.
But at what point do you become an adult?
You know,
because at some point,
what point do you think you became an adult?
I became an adult at 18.
And
so when you become an adult, you have to take responsibility for your own actions and the direction of your life.
Oh, and you have been able to control your life?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And if you got cancer, or if you met a woman who died in childbirth, or if you had a child who got meningitis, how much control did you have?
You're asking about me.
I am talking about you. You are talking about you. You're saying at 18, you had control over my life. I barely have control over my own mind. I have no control over what the society is doing. Do I have control?
Each individual, and I'm talking about society, each individual in this country has a choice to go left or right, be rich or poor, be happy or sad. They have a choice in this country.
You tell me how I can be rich. You just let me know this. How can I be rich?
I don't know your situation.
Well, you want me to tell you my situation?
No, we got that much time.
Okay, but we don't have enough time for that. I want you to tell me how I could be rich. I could not be rich. I don't want to be rich either. I want to be a decent human being.
That's a choice. I
could not be rich and be me.
That's a choice.
I don't want to live in a society where that is the value of a human being.
That's not the question. You asked me about being rich, and my whole point is, in this country, we have a choice of
every child has a choice of being.
I didn't say that. I said as an adult. Every
adult. Every person who at the age of 18, they no longer have mental illness. They no longer have addictions. They are no longer oppressed. They're no longer of a lower IQ. They no longer have no education. At 18, the star comes out, and suddenly they have a choice.
No, of course.
No.
If you're mentally incapacitated, you're mentally incapacitated. That's two different issues.
No, it isn't. You said everybody has a choice to be rich. I didn't even have a choice to have a decent paying job because I was a woman. I told you I worked in a factory for $1.09 an hour, and the men were making $15 an hour. Everybody has a choice. You're acting, that's naive.
Everybody has a choice.
No.
It may not be good choices, but I'm quite sure there were other industries around that you could have chosen to go work for.
No. Okay. Women didn't get jobs. You know, when on those levels, I remember working for the Occidental Petroleum Company, Dr. Armand Hammer, and his office was on, I think if I remember correct, the 15th floor. If I went to the 15th floor, I had to be wearing a skirt because Dr. Hammond was on the 15th floor.
Okay.
Nonsense.
Nonsense?
It was nonsense. Why should I wear a skirt? Why? I had a choice to wear pants. I was comfortable in pants, but I can't wear pants and keep that job.
Here's the thing. You had to go to the 15th floor.
I had to go to the 15th floor because I worked there, and every once in a while they sent me to the 15th floor, and I had to wear certain clothes because I was in the presence of Dr. Armand Hammer, the male hierarchy. Have you ever looked at the picture of what the United States?
There another job in that building that you could have had that didn't require you to go to the 15th floor, so therefore you won't be burdened with having to wear a dress?
Oh, come on. That isn't the point. No, there may have been enough. I didn't have that job. No, I didn't have that job.
But you could have.
No, that's speculation.
No.
You're speculating that I could have gotten another. I got my first job. You know, my boss used to chase me around the desk. Men came over to me and offered me money to have sex with them. I was just going to work. Come on. Tony, I don't believe you're this naive. I don't believe that you don't. Do you really? You believe there's no discrimination against blacks, Hispanics?
I didn't say that.
So you think they have equal chance?
Yes, in this country, yes, we do.
Okay, fine. Well, you can believe that and go to bed with that and sleep well.
No, we do.
And forget about all the other people. Forget about all the other people who don't have that.
Everybody has a choice in this country.
Okay, you keep repeating that.
People choose to be poor by their actions. People choose to be rich by their actions.
Okay, all right, that's fine. You want to believe that. I think it would do you well. And I know you're not going to hear me because you think you're right. I think you would do well. And I could do this for you if I was your counselor. To ask you, why do you have to keep proclaiming that everybody has a choice? Every 4-foot woman has the same choice as the 6-7-foot basketball player.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
Everybody's got a choice.
I didn't say the same. I said a choice. I didn't say the same choice. I said a
well,
choice.
Then it's not equal.
There you go. There you go. That's my point. There's no such thing as equality because the 5-foot person will not have the same opportunities as the person who's 6 or 7 foot.
But they have the same rights. They have the same rights.
That's 2 different things.
As a 4'10", I happen to be all of 5 feet.
That's 2 different things.
As a weak, sick 5-foot woman, I have the same rights.
You do.
Anybody else. But those rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when you are poor, you don't have that right. When you are living in a neighborhood with foul water, you don't have the same rights. When you're living in a place where there's violence, you don't have the same rights. Your child can't go to school without being harassed. Oh yeah, you're going to move to the suburbs where you're not wanted, or to buy a house that you can't afford. I'm asking you, Tony, in all sincerity, why do you want to believe this? Now you can say because I'm right.
Now, either we're gonna end this.
You want to believe this?
Either a person has a choice whether they can be happy in life or miserable. A person has a choice when they wake up in the morning whether they want to go stand on the exit ramp of an interstate with a cup in their hand, or they want to go down the road and work at McDonald's for what that owner is willing to pay them.
That's right. And that job isn't going to give them medical insurance either. And how many of those people are on food stamps and need government assistance, even though they are working? And, you know, I don't know what your history is, but you are like 1 inch away. You are like 1 inch away of what happens to a lot of other people. And you don't want to believe that. People have problems, emotional problems, physical problems, mental health problems, financial problems. People are overwhelmed. Some women have been raped. I have. Have you?
I don't get a connection.
Okay. I have been traumatized in ways you haven't. You have been traumatized in ways that I have not.
Now, stop that right there. You don't know me that well.
Okay. I am sure there are ways I've been traumatized that you haven't. And I'm sure you've been traumatized in ways that I haven't.
You can't put that on me. I don't presume about you personally. I would not allow you to be presumed that about me. You don't know anything about me with that.
Okay. So then do you believe there are ways you've been traumatized that I have not?
We're not getting into this conversation.
You don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But don't say that is not true.
No, I didn't say that. What I said you cannot say that about me because you don't know me that well.
Say it. I asked you.
You made a statement.
I took it back.
Okay, fine. Take it back and leave it there.
I did take it back, and I said, "Do you believe that you've been traumatized?"
I said I'm not going to answer that.
Okay, well that's fine. Then don't answer that.
Okay, so fine. Let's leave that there and tell people how they want to get a hold of you and stay in touch with you if they choose to.
Right. If you choose to. I have written something called the New Declaration of Independence, and it's based on the fact that we are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I believe that this government is destroying what little we had. And I do believe that our country was lucky. We had some good leadership. We had incredible natural resources that did not stop us from destroying the Native American people. It did not stop us from exploiting women, blacks, white men, all kinds of people. It didn't stop us. But we had something that most people didn't have. And we had some opportunities, but those opportunities are being taken away. And our entire nation is being traumatized as people are now afraid. And unfortunately, most people, Tony, are afraid. They've been raised to be afraid, and they don't even know it. They were afraid of somebody, something. And life is very unpredictable, and life is very scary. And so people are very afraid. And now we have a government that's making people even more afraid. And it's taking away that life, that liberty. People are being dragged out of places where they're working. The Democrats are being thrown in, arrested. People are becoming afraid, and we are losing that. And this is a government that has lost its legitimacy totally, as far as I am concerned. If they can bring in South Africans who are being massacred by the millions in South Africa, white South African, but they throw out everybody who's of color. I say there is no equality in that. So something is wrong. Something is rotten. We have a right to eliminate that government and institute something else, which is what the Declaration of Independence originally said. And I'm saying if we're going to look at the bottom of our problems, the bottom of our problems is we have an inequality of power in this country, an inequality of wealth in this country, and wealth buys power. We have people who are being kept in ignorance. We have people who are being brainwashed on a regular basis.
Keep it short.
And they're not willing to take a look at what is the social and economic system. The purpose of a society is to care for the needs of people on the earth. That is our purpose. And I believe that. And if you're interested in reaching me, my nonprofit is called thestream.info. And if you go to thestream.info/next steps, you'll see ways that we can respond. I'm also a musician. I have all kinds of books and music and everything, all free. I give it all away because I believe that people need a lot of help, and I want to do whatever I can. You can write to me at beth@thestream.info if you would like.
Well, Beth, this has been a very enlightening discussion. I'm quite sure my people got a lot out of it. They've been able for the first time see socialism and capitalism side by side and say, hey, which one do you want to choose? You want to be over in Russia or China, or you want to be here in America?
Oh, come on, Tony.
You want to be here or over in Europe? So
I didn't say that. I said, do you want to live in a society that cares for people in the earth, or do you want to live in a society where you're exploited?
Appreciate you, and be blessed, be good, and be free.
I am.
Thanks for listening to today's show. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. And look for Project Third Eye Open on your favorite social media platforms. Check out our webpage at projectthirdeyeopen.com. And that's Third Eye with the letter I. projectthirdeyeopen.com. Or drop us a note at tonyel@projectthirdeyeopen.com. That's tonyel@projectthirdeyeopen.com. As you wait for our next podcast to drop, don't take anything we've said as fact. Instead, do your own homework, make up your own mind, then take action. Until next time, be blessed, be good, and be free.